Our kids can't afford to go to college. They can't afford housing. We can't afford to lose our job and lose health insurance. Working people are ground down to the nub at this point. These are the snapshots of modern life. I think we've lost the plot as a party. I mean, this is the party of John Lewis, Shirley Chisholm. Those people are not being platformed within this party anymore. Now I'm in the Democratic Party, where I expect those views to actually have traction. And they're looking at me like, don't rock the boat. Whatever you do, don't talk about the incumbent's voting record. I'm sorry, she's not representing me. The truth is we are frustrated. I don't see the passion in our representatives that represents that desperation that people are feeling. And we are very, very, very close nationally to being taxed without proper representation. And I think that goes on both sides of the aisle. I really do. I think everybody's upset.
Hi, I'm Alex, and I'm pissed. Why? Well, because here in Kansas, all 4 of our representatives are corrupt, in my opinion. They all take money from
a specific pack that I'm a little too scared to mention by name.
Aside from that, they're part of a system that's tricked our nation into believing that nothing can be done for the common good of the average American. And we pay these guys a lot of money. Unfortunately, corporations just pay them more, as long as they're willing to sell us out. And that sucks. It's not all bad, though. In the past few years, we've seen the rise of a few representatives with a backbone, willing to stand up and fight for policies that help out regular folks like you and me. I'm excited to tell you that Kansas now has the opportunity to elect one. In today's video, we'll meet Sarah Preu, a lifelong Kansan who's running for federal office in the 3rd Congressional District. In this video, we discuss several key issues like the economy, investing in American infrastructure, the Iran conflict, government corruption, rural Americans being left behind, and the fate of the Democrat Party as we know it. If you want to learn more about her, or if you want to join her team, I'll link to her website in the description below. For full transparency, I'm not being paid by her or anyone else to make this video. I'm not part of her campaign, as of right now anyways. I'm just a good old private citizen with a lot of hate in my heart for the way this country treats decent people. So we're doing some journalism today, because my dream is to one day see corporate lobbying abolished. Oh, hey Gigi. Because my dream is to one day see corporate lobbying abolished and new anti-corruption laws to completely reshape our government so that they actually serve us, the American people, again. I want anyone who shares that dream to succeed. You can also find this interview on various streaming apps if you're on the go. Link in the description, but without further ado, please enjoy this interview and have a wonderful day. Sarah Preu, I am so excited to meet with you today. You are currently running for 3rd Congressional District.
That's right. I'm running in the primary against Sharice Davids, our incumbent. Yep.
Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself? What's your story?
Sure. So my name is Sarah Preu. I was born in Leavenworth. I have raised my children in Kansas District 3, everywhere from Wyandotte County, where we bought our first starter home at 18th and State Avenue, down to Overland Park, Prairie Village, and now we're in Fairway. So I know my way around Kansas District 3, and I'm a technologist, so that's my background. I also am a community organizer. I've run nonprofits. I've started nonprofits. I've worked on the ground with nonprofits for over 20 years. So once I became a mom and a technology worker, it really became like my side gig because I had to make money. But at this point, my kids are graduating and they're a little older. And so I'm returning to my roots, and it feels really good to work with folks and speak with folks and see what's important to them.
Have you always been heavily interested in politics, like involved, or what got you started into that?
I was a strange kid. I've always loved it. My parents, my mom was a Republican, one issue voter. My dad was a Democrat. And of course, every 4 years, we had some very exciting conversations and very animated debates in the house.
I was just about to ask that. Were you a debate kid?
At home.
Okay, I got you. Because there's a very popular debate to politics pipeline, it seems.
There is. I will say I had 4 brothers and no sisters, and I was 4 of 5. So no one's gonna shout me down. I know how to go grab the floor when I have something to say. You had to learn. But yeah, that's why I got really interested, because I always felt that my dad's arguments made so much more sense to me. And my mom, I just didn't quite align. I just didn't understand where she was coming from a lot. But that said, my mom was a school social worker. She absolutely informed everything I think about in terms of fairness, equity, and what matters to working people. She's the source of all of that knowledge for me.
Are you a lifelong Kansan? Is that what you said?
Yes, I am. Mm-hmm. And we were definitely the working poor. My parents worked 2 jobs. My mom actually, she and I went to college together at night, and she was working full time. I was going to high school, and we took comp classes together at the community college. We actually graduated from college the same week, and with our undergrads. I like to give people that background. Like, it's not just that I saw that she was working with needy folks. We were those folks too. So we really used a lot of those same programs that that she was ending up helping people get hooked up with as well as a social worker.
Right. So you're kind of like raised by the community in a way.
I was. I always say, I feel like I was a good investment, you know?
So let's get into the actual election and everything. There are several key issues on your website, but which are the ones that are closest to your heart, if you can name a few?
Top three for me are ending ICE. What I saw in January and what we saw kind of over the last year has really been very moving for me, and it was really some of those votes from our incumbent that really animated me and motivated me to get into the race. We need to have immigration reform. We do, and that's across the political spectrum. We want and we've wanted for 20 plus years immigration reform. Issue number 2 is going to be taxing billionaires, because we have to pay for programs, and we need to pay for programs like the programs that I used growing up that have been defunded and underinvested in. And what that is underinvestment in working people. Number 3 is an arms embargo to Israel. When I say that's a genocide, that's not my opinion, right? Like, this is this isn't a matter of opinion. Every human rights organization, around the world that is recognized has called this a genocide. Those are the experts. It's not Sarah from Kansas calling this a genocide. So yes, we cannot fund that anymore. And you can draw a direct line from our policy with Israel and Gaza to the Iran war that we're suffering through right now. And nobody likes this on any side of the political spectrum. Nobody likes it, and we have got to put a line in the sand there.
I'm pretty sure like some polling data has shown that the war is in both Gaza and Iran are both vastly unpopular. That actually kind of brings us to the next question. To bring us to the most obvious question, so why primary Sharice Davids, the current representative of the 3rd District?
Okay, she is, I believe, not representing this district and the sentiments of the district. We always hear this very fearful line of, oh, but it's a purple, we're a blue dot in a red state. Yes, we are, and we are a solidly blue dot. And we have the folks on the ground believe these policies are wrong, and she continues to cross the aisle to vote for things that are not in our interest. Just 2 nights ago, right? She voted the Corca Act. She went over with 32 other Democrats. She crossed the line and voted with Republicans. And it sounds really great on paper. It's about supply chain theft and organized crime, which, I mean, won't someone think of the billionaires, for the love of God? Number 1, I'm already skeptical that we need an entire bill dedicated because we have such theft going on. But number 2, built into that bill is more funding for a new department within ICE, of all places, to prosecute organized crime. So, again, one more time, go into the trough for ICE. I don't understand. It's not reflective of what I'm hearing on the ground. It's not reflective of some pretty decent recent research on independents, not just Democrats. You're seeing 60% of independents saying, I agree with the sentiment and ICE. I agree with. Now, we maybe disagree on what exactly that means, right? But that is a very unpopular way to spend our tax dollars.
Yeah, and in terms of expense, I believe, I think the ICE budget, I can fact check this after the fact and post, but I believe it's more than like some militaries in the world, which is insane to me.
That tells you it's not about immigration. That's not about immigration. If it were about immigration, we'd have an immigration bill on deck. With all of this big push, right, over this big shock and awe, they would have been backing it up with a bipartisan immigration reform bill. I haven't heard of one since Trump stomped it out the summer before he was elected. So again, I'm all for bipartisanship. We're not going to get much done if we can't go across the aisle when it's important, right? And when we can agree and we aren't giving away the farm, literally, by meeting these people halfway. Because when they meet you meet someone that extreme halfway, you're still an extremist.
Actually, that kind of brings us to our next question as well. According to the Associated Press, Democrats' favorability of their party plummeted after the 2024 election from 85% in September 2024 to 67% in October 2025. And despite overwhelming victories in November's off-season elections and a string of wins since then, those views haven't recovered. Other polling indicates that Democrats are deeply frustrated with their party. To be fully transparent, I am one of those. But why do you think that people feel this way? What's sort of causing this underlying ire towards the party at the moment?
I think exactly what we're talking about here. You and I can both agree on this. I think we've lost the plot as a party. I mean, this is the party of John Lewis. This is the party of Shirley Chisholm. Like, where are those people? Those people are not being platformed within this party anymore. And so the ire is real. And it's not just at the gas pump, guys. It's not just, all that's inconvenient. But the truth is this has been a race to the middle for so long, a race to compromise that yields nothing. You know, you get 2 steps forward, you get 4 steps back, and you never recover that ground. And we've been seeing it cycle after cycle. The truth is we are frustrated. We are frustrated. I'm a lifelong Democrat, as I alluded to. I have always been proud to be a Democrat. I am that person. Now I'm in the Democratic Party, where I expect those views to actually have traction, and they're looking at me like, don't rock the boat, whatever you do. Don't talk about the incumbent's voting record. I'm sorry, she's not representing me, and she's not representing many people I know. So that's where I think the ire is. It's not, our kids can't afford to go to college. They can't afford housing. We can't afford to lose our job and lose health insurance. I mean, we're practically back to pre-ACA levels of insurance disparity. Working people are ground down to the nub at this point. And what we get from our party is pretty lukewarm, well, what do you working people think? I don't know, guys. Maybe go spend a little more time in the districts, not for photo ops, but really see what people are dealing with, because it's devastating to hear the stories. I can even give you an example. My dad, an independent, never actually registered as a Democrat, which is very, very typical of him, but he always votes Democrat. But he had some health troubles, right? And so over the last year and a half, he asked to go to a nursing home. I didn't want him to go, right? That's not my culture. I don't do that, right? But he wanted to, and it was eye-opening what elderly Americans have to do in order to actually get into a nursing home. If they can't pay out of pocket, they essentially have to become destitute. And so they can actually qualify for Medicaid and have that round-the-clock care. He definitely needed it, right? And then I go into these nursing homes and I see these folks, they've had to give up their homes, everything they've worked for 40 years. All of a sudden, because they can't pay out of pocket $8,000 a month or $10,000 a month, all of a sudden they are poorest. These are the snapshots of modern life, and I just don't see the passion in our representatives that represents that desperation that people are feeling. So yeah, it really does matter to see yourself in your representatives, and we are very, very, very close. Nationally, I wouldn't say so much locally, but nationally, to being taxed without proper representation. And I think that goes on both sides of the aisle. I really do. I think everybody's upset.
Absolutely. And I will say, especially for my age bracket, Gen Z, I think a lot of the apathy towards politics in general comes from a place of seeing representatives do absolutely nothing with their power that is meaningful to their daily lives. I think it's difficult to try to convince my own friends to go out and vote and be engaged in politics when at the end of the day they say, well, what has it done? What has your vote done to currently change things? And it starts at the representation level. Senators and congresspeople and obviously the executive branch as well, all working towards a goal that is furthering the common good of the working class Americans who make up this country. And I think that's where a lot of that comes from as well. So I'm not surprised by the statistic. This also brings us to another problem as well. well. So as our next question, according to Pew Research Center, as of last year, 17% of Americans say they trust the United States government to do what is right. In a world where the majority of Americans agree on certain issues, I'll just name a few, 66% of Americans say the government has a responsibility to make sure all Americans have health care coverage of some kind. 88% say marijuana should be legal for medical or recreational use. Many Americans are not happy with the economy. And these are just a few examples of many areas where Americans find common ground on. But obviously, it's not seen at the legislative level. In your opinion, what do you think is the biggest thing right now that is stopping the government from improving the lives of everyday Americans?
So I think what you've touched on, right, is that kind of commonality and that sort of shared vision and shared community. It doesn't raise donations. It doesn't make people mad. It doesn't ride the algorithm right. I mean, it really, I will say, I just do wonder if there is almost a concerted effort to keep us from understanding each other across the aisle. You're right. I mean, people across the aisle want even common sense gun laws. Like, that's actually not that divisive of the same thing with Medicare for all. Now, if you go troll the comments on Facebook, you might be led to believe that this is a very divisive issue. It's not. To your point, these are, I think what's wild to me is there's this whole fear mongering aspect of me running this campaign. Like, oh my God, we can't possibly give up a blue seat because your policies are so wildly liberal, progressive, leftist. You know what? When I talk to regular people, they don't care about any of those labels. Those labels don't register with them. They know that their 23-year-old can't afford to go buy a house. They cannot afford health insurance on their own. They can't pay for college. I think they know that. Even I was listening to an older person who said, I would love to downsize. My interest rates are so low, I can't even downsize to an apartment in Johnson County because I will be paying an extra $300 a month. They willfully are like, I want my house to go to a young family. It would be amazing to hand off my house. It just doesn't make fiscal sense. So yeah, I truly think there's an aspect of this that is a little bit cynical. I really do. That dividing us is kind of keeping the status quo in play, right? And the status quo is working for some people. Like, it's working for the people who go to Washington and stay there for 40 years. Chuck Schumer, it's working for Chuck Schumer. Jeffries, it's working for these guys, It's the money machine a lot of the time. I really genuinely believe that. And now so many of them get their corporate dollars that they don't even really super need us to be at each other's throats. As long as they get that, that super PAC money, they're okay.
Right. So that's where I think a lot of this frustration comes from. So let's talk about the affordability crisis. This is a reality that many Kansans are facing, many people across the country are facing. But on the Gen Z side of things, obviously we have the ability to buy a house, to start a family, to chase the American dream. It just seems to get further and further out of reach every day for people like me. On the other side of the spectrum, we have boomers, Gen Xers that are worried about retirement, fighting the rising healthcare costs and inflation. Let me read you the statistic. According to an Alliance Health study, 67% of Americans worry more about running out of money than death. No pressure or anything, but tell us some of the ways that you're hoping to tackle the cost of living crisis, and legislation that you would support.
I'm going to go big picture on you because I can give you the exact. We're going to do exit taxes. We're going to do wealth taxes. Those are no-brainers. We've got to get back to the corporate tax structure that was in place in the 1960s. It worked very well in the 1960s and 1950s. So that we had plenty of growth. We had plenty of productivity increases. So anybody who tells you that we can't sustain an 80 or 90% corporate tax is not a student of history, American history.
If you want to learn more about why the average American family is so much worse off economically, then you should check out this video. I'm going to link in the description. It's by this channel, Neatling. They do a great job at illustrating the point that Sarah's trying to make here about the 1960s tax structure. It's definitely worth a watch. I will link in the description.
So starting there, right? Like these are the policies. These are, anybody who's a progressive, these are all kind of old news, and we know that these are things that are going to work. We just have to have the guts to go say it, right? And we have to go have the critical mass to go do it. But I also want to talk about trickle-down economics is not real. You do not trickle down wealth. It does not work that way. They hoard the wealth. What trickles down is the tax burden. And that is something that is common. That is a common pain point for Gen Z as well as Gen X and boomers. Boomers are seeing it because their property taxes are going through the roof. Now, they'll tell you it's because their valuation on their house is so much. They could sell it tomorrow if they really wanted to. What's going on is we are not getting that investment at the federal level. Even look at schools in Kansas. We have been underfunded since special education has been underfunded since what, 2018, hasn't been fully funded from the state level. Well, the state's just doing what the federal government's doing and giving them permission to do. That lack of investment is trickling down, and then it ends up in sales taxes, mill levies, property taxes. Guys, if you still want schools and you still want roads, your income tax, killing the income tax is not going to kill taxes in general. They just did that over in Missouri. They're getting ready to understand very, very deeply what I'm talking about. This is the hole that we are digging ourselves out of. Reaganomics, trickle-down economics, voodoo economics, as George Bush the first accurately called it, right? It does not work that way. The tax burden is what people actually see out of that. And they see the underinvestment in their schools. Went this Saturday and listened to the Olathe school district members, school board members, They talked about in two of their middle schools, they had to let go of 10 social workers. Social workers, now my mom was a social worker, so you're gonna get me on my soapbox a little here, but social workers are very often the one tide that is holding off poverty, starvation, lack of healthcare for families, like on the ground. And they just pink slipped all those folks because they couldn't afford to keep them because they are making up for underfunding coming from the state. That's just in schools, but you see it in housing, you see it in infrastructure. Thanks to Biden, we did get an infrastructure bill. We're still getting some benefits from that, right? But that is notable. Why is that notable? I don't know. Those are bills that used to get passed all the time, and now that's the major feather in our cap is that we got an infrastructure bill passed. Well, I mean, great. I'd call it bare minimum, guys. That's what you're there to do. You're not there to be on TikTok and tweet. You're there to serve the American people.
There's this sort of mindset currently that these programs are too expensive and that we can't possibly afford to fund them. And I think I don't know if you've been paying attention to what's going on in New York with obviously Zoran Mamdani's mayorship. There's been some programs that are proof that that these things work. These public programs work, right? They help out the average, everyday American, and I think that's hugely important to sort of espouse to, the general public, the voting public.
One of my favorite stories from that is that snowstorm that they had, and what was he giving people $50 a shift, and they didn't even have enough snow shovels. They were even getting more folks out than they could keep busy. Yeah. I never want to hear that Americans don't want to work. Right. You got to pay them right.
Yeah, of course. I know District 3 is not exactly the most rural, okay? But if elected, you'll be working on behalf of the whole state and country. So with that being said, I just want to know, what are some of the policies that you would fight for that could potentially improve the lives of rural Kansans, right? I feel like there's this sort of disconnect right now.
Yeah, and just for giggles, let me run through what is District 3, because a lot of people don't know, because it's been gerrymandered a few different times. Right. But we are southern Wyandotte County, pretty much south of 70, so that's Rosedale, that's Turner, that's Argentine, that's Stony Point, out to Bonner, okay? All of Johnson County, all of Franklin County, all of Anderson, and all of Miami. And yes, that is a very diverse group, right? I think if you look at that strip of WICO, though, it almost tells the story of the entire District 3, because you have these interurban, exurban, and then you've got rural areas within Edwardsville. Outside of Bonner, there's Delaware Township. It's really, that swath is so indicative of us. And what you realize is really, that what's important to folks is not different in Argentine versus Garnett. Garnett has food pantries just like that part of Waco has, right? They've got underfunded schools just like Waco has. So sorry, the question was what? Because I just wanted to talk.
Oh, it was. I want to know some of the policies that you fight for that could improve the lives of the rural Kansans.
Oh, absolutely. So I will talk about the Farm Bill that just did come out of committee. I don't think it's going to pass in the Senate, but it was 2 years, I think, past due. But it did have some good provisions in it, and Sharice actually had a hand in it. I don't want to be overly critical of her, but I will say there was a pretty disturbing provision that came out of committee with that was a gift to chemical manufacturers, where it indemnified them from any sort of lawsuit for carcinogenic chemicals, for farm workers and farmers would not be able to sue. Now, and I get this was a bipartisan bill, right? So I know she didn't handwrite that in her blood, but she did pull it out of committee like that. And it actually did not pass with that because a Republican from Florida said, whoa, this isn't MAHA. We can't pass this. Wow. So yeah, so some of the things that are in the Farm Bill but need to be fully funded. The Affordable Connectivity Program. So data equity out there is and connectivity equity is so hard to come by, right? Some really important cuts to programs that happened, 3 or 4 years ago, those need to be fully funded. The Affordable Connectivity Program is getting broadband for about $30 a month. I know this because I actually work for a fiber company. And when that hit, we had to do all sorts of rearranging. It also pulled funding, municipal funding was pulled for build outs of fiber, additional fiber like augments, so we could connect towns. And so we had to stop a bunch of those construction programs. We've since been able to lean on the municipalities themselves because they want it so bad, but the federal subsidy died. And that, again, that was probably 3 or 4 years ago in one of those omnibus bills that everybody had. Everybody gets, 3 hours to look at, and it's 2,000 pages long. So we got to bring that back, right? Number one. And then we have got to, one of the best things about Medicare for All is it inherently fixes some of that healthcare disparity, because you are now going to be able to fund GPs to go, which they don't have general practitioners in many of these towns. Anderson County hasn't had an OBGYN in practice for over 30 years. They have to drive to Olathe Regional to have a baby, an hour and a half away. I mean, I was sweating it coming from Waco to Shawnee Mission Health Center, Advent Health. I mean, I almost had to pull over then. With my second. No, it should be no surprise that rural health, which is something that the Trump administration just called a press conference on, rural maternal health is horrible. I mean, we know across the board. It's 30% higher than in urban areas, right? Of course, what they fail to talk about is that for Black mothers, it's a 200% disparity in maternal mortality. So, but that is not to discount the fact that rural folks are absolutely dealing with this too. So yeah, I think Medicare for All comes in and it really starts to even that playing field for folks in rural areas as well as urban areas. So yeah, and that is fully achievable if we stop giving money away for ballrooms, vanity lawsuits. I mean, what, 1.2 billion? I've heard 10 billion. I've heard it's all over the place, right?
Hey, corporate tax cuts.
Corporate tax cuts. I mean, the grift of this administration it seems to be going unchecked. My hope is that we at some point get a DOJ that's actually gonna enforce some of these laws. If you can't trust the person on the highest court in the land to be ethical, what do you have, right? If you can't find them and censure them, what are we doing? Sorry.
No, you're good. Absolutely. Hey, we're going to get to that.
Okay, good.
We're going to get to that. Well, circling back to the rural thing, I have another question about that. So, additionally, in your opinion, what do you feel that the Democrat Party can do to speak to these communities who, for the most part, are currently loyal Republican voting blocs? It seems like the rural areas of states in general have seemed to have fallen away from the Democratic Party, and I don't know if it's rather like the deterioration of labor or unions and labor protections and whatnot. whatnot. I just don't have the answers right now, and I'm just kind of curious where your head is at with that sort of thing, because Kansas is a very largely rural state.
I think it's progressive policies. Progressive policies, something so radical and leftist as thinking you deserve services for your tax dollars. Right? I genuinely think that farmers are some of the most pragmatic businessmen on the planet. I grew up going to my country cousin's house out in rural Leavenworth County every weekend, all summer long, and we had all these old farmers, and by the way, those guys were all members of a co-op. Sounds horribly socialist now, but they all they bought feed together, they bought fertilizer together, and that mitigated some of the risk of the market. These guys all being beholden to corporate markups now, whatever's happening in the Strait of Hormuz, the days of the co-ops were actually very protective for farmers. So I would encourage some of that community thinking, that return to that, not leaning on corporate farming and not leaning on corporate entities or subsidies to pull you guys out of these market volatility concerns. And I don't think there's been a more volatile market to be in farming besides the last 18 months. I mean, we've seen bankruptcies go through the roof. So yeah, I mean, subsidies aren't doing it anymore, right? They're not doing it anymore. We have to organize at the community level. We have to let rural people know that's the future.
And I think even at a baseline level, I feel like me and perhaps a Kansas farmer that I've never even met before could both agree that you shouldn't, be able to go bankrupt by just not having insurance and going to the hospital. You know what I mean? There's just very, very easy topics here that we're all on the same page on, as we, quoted from the earlier statistic. But all right, so let's take it to the national level now. ICE raids have become a hallmark of this current administration's immigration policy. And as of the recent Supreme Court case in 2025, I believe, Nome versus Vasquez-Perdomo, has essentially greenlit the federal government to racially profile individuals like myself. Your position to abolish ICE is a key piece of restoring some peace of mind to many immigrant families in the short term. But I want to talk about the long term and take it a step further, because I think a lot of people don't know what this post-administration looks like. All things must come to an end. Do you believe the federal government should seek legal actions against the federal immigration agents who have violated the Constitution in cases like the shooting of Alex Preu or the warrantless raids of homes in Minnesota, such as Chong Lee Scott Tao
For those who aren't aware, in the case of Chong Lee Scott Tao, on January 18th earlier this year, ICE agents forcibly entered a home in St. Paul, Minnesota. They broke down the front door of the residence at gunpoint without providing a warrant, as required by the Fourth Amendment, by the way, and arrested the 56-year-old naturalized U.S. citizen. He was let out into the freezing temperatures in nothing but his underwear, sandals, and a blanket. Despite his family attempting to present identification, the agents initially refused to look at it. They drove Tao to a separate location to ID him for about an hour and then dropped him off back home with a new open-concept front door. The person that DHS was actually looking for at Tao's residence was already in prison at the time of the raid. But to be clear, this is not an isolated incident. There are multiple instances of ICE acting without warrants, such as the cases of the Gibson Brown family, or the case of George Redis.
Where is your head at with those sort of things? Because I feel like there's an underlying desire, at least, as far as I can tell, for accountability.
I love this question because I think beyond, I'll talk about Alex Preu and I'll talk about what happened in Minnesota, but I want to say beyond that, I love this question because I don't think it's talked about enough that we are building the vision now. We need people with vision now because we are going to get our chance. The folks who have a problem with what's going on, we're going to get our chance. We better be prepared, and we better not be doing the same old corporate pockets crap that has been happening for the last 25 years. We need to come with a fresh vision, and we need to come with something that's going to get you guys, Gen Z, to the polls. So let me just say I'm very passionate about that. As a mom of an 18-year-old and a 19-year-old, that is one of the main reasons I'm doing this. The other main reason that I entered this race is because what we saw in Minnesota. I actually went to school. I went to my undergrad at the University of Minnesota. I lived about 5 blocks away from where Alex Preu was murdered in the street. I spent 4 years in that neighborhood, well taken care of, beloved neighbors. Minnesota gets it. They get it. That is a great place to live. I loved it there. And you know what? The taxes weren't low. We had buses. We had health clinics. We had literacy programs. I helped create a board for a Somali literacy program in my senior year. These are wonderful communities, right? My feeling is that those are illegal actions. And I think we just got one of those agents indicted, am I right? At the state level with Minnesota. Unfortunately, we can't get that federally. The truth is, guys, if you're only interested in the law when it's to prosecute the other party, then you don't have law. You don't have law and order if it's only for immigrants, if it's only for brown people. That is a level of inequity I don't think we've seen since Jim Crow, and I would call that a Jim Crow law that was passed at the Supreme Court level. And anybody, so my father is Native, and so I will tell you that my world of watching race in America is very different than somebody who presents like me. I know what it's like to be pulled over in a car with a brown man. The fact that that is now legitimate, that's legitimized, that's lawful to do. It is only law. It's only law and order if you implement it fairly across the board, guys. Otherwise, it's chaos. If every law is predicated on your political beliefs, then we don't have law and order. So yes, I think 100% our next DOJ first order of business. And that would be what I would hope the Senate that would be a confirmation hearing question, I'm hoping, out of the Senate. What will you do for ICE agents who have violated the constitutional rights of these folks? And by the way, murdered. I mean, you can, again, this should not be a divisive claim that that woman was murdered. She was shot in the side of her head. That is not someone who is debilitated and injured from being hit by a car who shot her in the temple and killed her. That is not reasonable or believable. But regardless, right, like this, you're right, this is to me a litmus test for our representation in Congress. This is a pass or fail. This is lawful or it's not lawful, and it should not matter who's in office.
It feels like the Wild West at this point, because there's a lot of working with impunity, right, at which that the federal enforcement officers are, operating on. It's frightening to know that there are agents out there who just do not care, who are firing at the hip, quite literally. But like, in a time where we've always had issues. I mean, I feel like with law enforcement, obviously not being held accountable, right? Qualified immunity, the ability for law enforcement officers to work with impunity and do whatever they want, right? I don't think, in my opinion, that obviously that should be afforded to anyone, right? We should all have to follow the same rules. And I think that's where a lot of anxiety is coming from, at least like within people in my community, right? We don't know if we're going to be stopped, we're going to get our ass beat. Like it is a truly terrifying time here in the States, especially if you come from a minority family. I was wondering, perhaps your thoughts on law enforcement in general. Like, do you believe there should be some sort of reform to the way we do law enforcement here in the United States in general?
My phrase is demilitarize the police. There has been a progressive march towards militarization of police forces of towns that are like 10,000 people deep. That level of investment, I mean, I think we saw it in Uvalde, right? That is a tragedy that, for all intents and purposes, that police force should have been over-prepared for what happened there. With the investment and the comparison of what they spent on that versus schools and literacy in that community, what a fraud. Truly. So I believe these things are all actually really connected, that the progressive militarization of the police has convinced these folks that they are in a war zone. And so they act as though when they are pulling someone over, every time that they are at risk for, being in Fallujah, essentially, right? I cannot believe that giving these people this firepower, it doesn't convince them that they need to be brutal, right? That they're in a brutal world and that they cannot trust their fellow community members. So, yeah, which I don't think is true. I think, and not across the board, but I do think you see, the police unions are great, and I will say that they are very good about making sure that their folks are protected. But I think we cannot discount the fact that this militarization of the police has coincided with brutality and George Floyd and people dying at the hands of police at unprecedented numbers. So yeah, those things go hand in hand.
I think it's a lack of accountability as well. Like when it comes down to an internal investigation where we investigated ourselves and we found ourselves not guilty of doing anything wrong. That's where a lot of the frustration and fear comes from, affected communities.
Yeah, and of course, as a daughter of a social worker, I think every community should have an entire team of social workers who are there to help both the police themselves and they're dealing with, these are life or death. I don't want to minimize that, right? These are life or death scenarios some of the time, and one time's enough, right? But I do believe that we have ratcheted up the rhetoric to the point, and we have weaponized policing in this country so much that I think on both sides of the car there, right, of both sides of the badge, nobody's winning there. Like nobody's feeling good about what's going on. So let's get them the kinds of mental health support. Let's get our community the mental health support they need. And also, let's make sure we're not pulling over brown people because they're brown, because it doesn't help anybody. Right?
I agree. I like that one.
It just makes people mad, dude. It doesn't really.
To wrap up, we got our last question here, and now let's zoom out even further and let's talk about the war. I want to hear your thoughts about the Iran conflict. So, gas is up as a direct result of the Strait of Hormuz being closed. According to the Washington Post, the Pentagon requested more than $200 billion in budget requests additionally for the Iran war. Would you support legislation ending the war? And where do you think the $200 billion could be better spent if you got to choose?
This is such an amazing question. So yeah, of course, this is, again, we talk about long tail efforts. 46 of my 48 years on this planet, yes, we have this regime, right, has been in control of Iran. Suddenly, we have an imminent threat. None of that makes any sense. This man is very clearly, playing the markets, manipulating the markets. I don't think there's any, I'm not saying that's the end all be all of why he's doing this, but I just think it's definitely a perk. And so absolutely we need to end it. We also need to investigate anyone who enriched themselves on shorting oil or oil futures. We absolutely need to know who benefited from that. And we need to put laws into place that would prevent that in the future. To me, that is an absolutely impeachable offense. And in a laundry list of impeachable offenses, that one should be right up there. All right. So yeah, when I think about what $200 billion could do in this country, and by the way, that's $200 billion over what, 60 days? Yeah. 60 days, guys, 60 days. $200 billion for a progressive candidate like myself is like being a kid in a candy store, right? $200 billion can give us universal pre-K for 3 and 4 year olds. It will pay for that for 3 years in full. 3 years for every 3-year-old and 4-year-old in America, and every family in America to be able to be fully back to work and actually earning instead of paying for their kid to go be in daycare and taking home whatever minuscule thing is left off the top of daycare costs. Like, that is life-changing legislation, right? Paid family leave. That would pay for 3 or 4 years, almost 4 years of paid family leave. Now that's not just maternity, that's mental health, that's substance abuse, that's an elderly parent, that's a sickness, that's anything, right? That pays for 12 weeks at 66%, which is what you're getting, through an insurance policy right now. That is through the government, life-changing, right? Universal community college. For free, with money left over for books, by the way. I did fact check that one, which for people who paid for their own books, hey, I remember doing that. Like, I had to scrounge together $500 every semester just to make sure I had the books, right? Life-changing legislation, right? So yeah, there's green energy subsidies. You could move the needle for working people in probably half a dozen ways tomorrow with $200 billion.
Yeah, if I could submit my agenda onto you.
Please, let's do it.
I love trains. I
love trains too.
I went to Boston a couple of years ago, and it changed my life. I was like, wow, it could truly be a dream. I'm walking everywhere. They got the stations out to the various to the suburbs and everything. Yeah. It was very cool. High-speed rail. Just put that one in the pocket, you know.
You're right, though, because not that I want to bring the California project into it, because it's been over budget and there's not much to show, but it would pay for that 2 times over, right? Like what they've gotten so far. So yes, and I think there's such wisdom to trains. Oh my God, you and I just so get along. My dad actually worked for the railroad when I was a kid. So
my grandpa did.
Yeah. So my dad would be gone for like 4 or 5 days at a time, and he was overnights, and he would take like a sack of potatoes, and he would like live on potatoes and coffee for like a week. And I would miss him because I was so little, and I was like 5 or 6 maybe. And he said, okay, just listen for the train whistle at night, and then you'll know that I'm nearby, which is so beautiful, right? And so sad because he was working 2 jobs in order to pay for us, right? But I've always loved trains ever since. I have actually taken the train from Boston to Kansas City before.
Oh, that's so cool.
I have taken, pretty recently, I actually took it from New York to Kansas City, and we went up upstate. I love it. It's a beautiful way to travel, and I feel like if we had regional compacts, I think between like a 35 corridor down to Dallas up through the Twin Cities, I think you would have amazing take on that. And then you could work east-west to make it happen, right? There's ways to do this, and there's ways to do it smart, and and everybody's tired of airline travel.
Oh, tell me about it. You know, the prices are crazy. Yes. Well, and I think getting to the crux of your point too, though, there's so many other pieces of legislation and policy that could benefit the average American, average Kansan in so many different ways, and yet we choose not to do it. This is kind of a bonus question. You don't have to, you know.
No, it's great.
Many Americans also believe that there is a current ongoing problem with government corruption, right? Corporate interest. I think there's sort of this underlying like frustration with the government constantly serving the needs of companies over the people that, you know, elected them. And I think what's most frustrating is all the things that we just talked about, right? Like public transportation, education, healthcare, anything. It ultimately feels like that there are powers that be that are constantly, railroading? To circle back to it, railroading progress in these areas. And
yeah, it almost seems like it's beneficial to them to convince us that the government can't do anything, because that they can't pull it together, that we can't trust them to do our healthcare or daycare or trains, right? It's almost beneficial for them to convince us that they're inept so that they can keep being inept and they can keep being beholden to those corporate interests where they really get their money. I want to call out to the fact that my opponent, the incumbent, has $5.2 million in a campaign fund. That is cycle to cycle to cycle. There's no requirement to spend all of that. You can just sit on it. I mean, and she's building that war chest for someone to come and actually primary her or actually have a tough Republican opponent. But I think there's something to be said for the fact that yeah, there's just mass corruption, and there's this sense that there's rules for these folks, and then there's rules for all the other folks. Like the laws apply to anyone who makes less than $100 million a year. Everyone else, it seems like, operates outside the rule of law. They operate outside national borders. I mean, it's a proven fact that billionaires are bad for national security. You cannot have patriotism for someone who really doesn't need this country. They don't need this workforce. They don't need this government. They don't need it. They can move between countries with impunity. Honestly, you talked about where is the anger coming from. I don't even think it's the fact that we aren't getting anything for our tax dollars. That's old news. The fact that we can have literal statutory rapists in our government, regular Americans are so disgusted and ashamed. I mean, that's what it is. I think it's tough to it's tough to engage, because once you start really getting engaged, then you have skin in the game and you have to demand better, right? It's work, but I do think it's worth it. And I do think we can move the needle. I wouldn't be doing this if I didn't think passion couldn't move the needle. I do think it can. I've seen it over and over in my life. You know, when you believe in what you're doing, right, and you put who you are into it, there is never a loss. You're not losing. You are winning something, right? So yeah, I'm sorry, I got up on a total tangent on that. But I also want to talk to you about being Gen Z, and I do think this is really important because I like to tell this to my kids. I am doing this for you guys as well. I am motivated. When I say I'm motivated by young people, I am, because I genuinely think Gen X and Gen Z have this sort of strange connection, whereas you guys were in first, fourth, fifth grade when Sandy Hook hit, right? You are Sandy Hook generation. You are the kids that we abandoned to the gun lobby, and we have never rectified that. It's deeply moving for me to think about your generation and where you are politically now after having been abandoned in that way by people in power. It is no secret to me why you guys are disenchanted and disengaged. I mean, look what happened after David Hogue, right? Like that, he was tossed aside as if it didn't matter, right? That was such a galvanizing moment, and we got nothing out of it, essentially, you know, other than a whole movement of folks like him who are saying, yeah, this is not the Democratic Party that I expected. This is not the party that represents me. We're going to push it from the inside, right? And that's not nothing, but I do think there's a disillusionment that I feel deeply connected to, because I remember watching 9/11 happen on the TV screen, and that being the same sort of disillusionment. Because then it was like, oh wait, we're doing what? We're going to go to wage a war, and where? There's weapons of mass destruction. Where? All of this happening over the span of a couple weeks. Yeah, that was a level of, again, disillusionment that my generation, I feel sad that Gen X has kind of lost that. We used to understand that. We used to understand that we got us. And something happened, but you guys still have it. And I'm here to tell you some of us still have it, and we're gonna clear the way. We're gonna clear the way for you, but you gotta show up. I don't even need your money, man. I just need you to show up.
Well, I can say, you know, with full confidence that I will be there. I will show up because it's been great meeting you.
Yes.
Thank you so much for doing this. It's really nice to meet you, and I wish you the best of luck in this primary. I really think that you can do this.
I think so too. I think we're going to shock them.
Yeah, I hope so. I really hope so. So, well, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks, Alex. This is fun.
Thanks again for watching this video. You can find the links in the description for all of our sources and information on how you can get in contact with Sarah. Now it's time for the part of the video where I get on my soapbox. I can't stress enough how consequential this upcoming election is, not just for Kansas, but for the whole nation. There is no greater example of this than a certain set of files that is still not fully disclosed. I've never considered myself much of a conspiracy theorist, but for the powers that be to redact the names of the abusers and do absolutely nothing to hold the most powerful people in the world accountable for the atrocities they've committed is yet another reminder of what we've known for a very long time. Corruption is and has been fully legal, so long as there's nobody to make these people face consequences. I'm gonna keep hammering this point home in every single video, but it will take every single American to organize amongst ourselves, our communities, and put up representatives with integrity. We need people who are truly incorruptible to fix this nation. So I'm trying to do my part, and I hope Sarah can get to where she needs to be. I just hope there are more people like her, so I've been trying to find more of them. I'm helping my friend Laura run for office here in the state. I've never done anything like this, but hopefully it'll be a good learning experience. That also means, though, that I'm not sure when my next video will be, but I think I'm at peace where this channel is. And I'll tell you a story why. Earlier this year, I created a guide on how to run for the Kansas House of Representatives. And I don't know if I've ever been more proud of a video, because I received a message from someone that goes, "Your videos about running for office are unbelievably, unironically helpful. Whether I win the seat or not, I'm trying to make a point. So essentially, thank you. This has been my plan for 3 years now, and I now have a step-by-step guide." Sure, the video didn't do numbers on YouTube, but I sometimes forget that on the internet, it's not always about the numbers. It's about the difference that you can make, and that gives me peace knowing that this is my way of helping. So to leave you with a quote, just do your best. That's all you can do.